Hello everyone, welcome back to Planet Coaster 2 and welcome back to Utopia World. In the first episode we built this entrance area and I've made a couple of very small tweaks to it that I just wanted to show you before we get into the time lapse today. So firstly I have added a little more detail to these lampposts, recoloured them because I thought the blue was just a little bit too garish. And I also wasn't happy with those modern lights that we had on the entrance building. So I've made some custom ones and replaced them with them. You can see it's just a bracket and a hook and then a custom lamp made from way too many pieces rotated round. But I think it looks a lot better. So I've been using these quite a lot throughout the sort of entrance area. You might also notice, if you've got a keen eye for detail, that this entrance building is now quite a bit taller. I just thought that we're going to have to scale it up a bit so that it makes sense with the size of some of the upper buildings. That meant we could also move the toilet buildings up to ground levels. They're not sunk into the ground anymore. And obviously that makes a lot more sense. I'm sorry if you can hear the guests sort of talking over me in the background. I probably should have turned that volume down a little bit, but never mind. Other than that, everything's pretty much the same. Added some different lighting onto this building. I can't remember if we'd already done that, but I think that looks quite good as well. Sort of more functional lighting. Obviously you can see I still need to sort out some of the paths and stuff because we've got guests clipping through buildings. But I believe that the barrier now works in game, so we can go back to using that like we did in the first game. So if we go through the entrance building, we've now got this blank canvas to work with. And from here I'm going to start working on some sort of main street or central plaza area for the park. So without further ado, let's get into the time lapse. Welcome into the time lapse for the build, and to be honest I struggled a bit with inspiration of what to actually do for this area, so I went into Google and Pinterest and all the usual sort of sources of inspiration for ideas of what to actually build. And something I found quite challenging was that when you're searching for generic theme park ideas, it tends to just throw you Disneyland and Disney style parks and all the classic Main Street sort of buildings like that, and that's not really what we're going for in this build. So I suppose I should really talk a little bit about what this park is meant to be, because I didn't really cover that much in the first episode. So it's sort of like a fairly low budget park, I guess, but like a low budget American amusement park. So I suppose not really low budget in terms of rides. There will be some thrill coasters and some high intensity rides, but they don't have much of a budget for theming. That's sort of the idea. So it's called an amusement park, but obviously we probably will have maybe that one newer area that's more heavily themed than the rest of the park later on in the build. But to start with, we wanted stuff that's fairly generic and low budget, and that's where I struggle really, to try and build things that are realistic without going crazy with the detailing and theming. So yeah, I've given myself a bit of a challenge here, and that's the idea really. So we're thinking sort of like Six Flags, maybe Cedar Fair. I don't know. I don't think they're still. I don't know if they've sold all their parks. Actually, I don't really keep up with the theme park news. I heard something like that at some point. But also parks like Wells of Fun, King's Island, King's Dominion. Those sort of parks are the sort of inspiration for this park. And yeah, the first building actually, after saying all that, is inspired by a reference image I saw for something in a Disney park.
So obviously the complete opposite to what I've just been explaining that this is meant to be, but I just used some inspiration from that really for the brickwork and the windows, and that was it. So obviously these windows are custom made. We just don't have that many generic windows or doors in the game at the moment. They're all quite heavily themed, which is a shame because obviously a lot of the pieces in the game are really versatile and you can do a lot with them, and they're not too heavily themed even in the theme sets. But when it comes to windows and doors, yeah, we're limited at the moment, and I like to now try and do the sunken in windows and doors with a break in the wall because it just looks a bit more realistic. So that's what that's what I use really for the reference image here, and for some of the colours like the green roof I think works really well with this brickwork. And yeah, it's just a pretty believable build. Once I got the shape of it and everything together. I did go back and make a custom roof for this section because obviously we don't have any roofs in this shape because I've done the walls all custom. Sorry if you heard my phone go off there. I will now put it on silent, which I always forget to do before recording commentary, but it's just how it is, I'm afraid. This section of roof actually took me ages to do. I'm not particularly good at things like this. It's not perfect on the grid, you know, it's not perfectly isometrical, but it works well enough, it fits into the space, so it's fine. And I haven't really talked about what this building is actually supposed to be either, so this is going to be the guest services building. So it has to look pretty generic. I've not done the interior yet. You'll be able to see a bit later on that there is some flooring in there, and I've added a little bit of detail to the walls, but I haven't done an interior yet. I do intend to go back and do this at some point, not with every building in the park because I don't want the piece count to get too crazy, but I do want to do it for sort of the main buildings, especially in the central plaza. Now moving on to the second building, and I tried several different things here and basically spent a whole evening making these facades. I did two different ones, completed the facades and then realised that they do not fit in at all. The scale's completely off compared to the other building we've got here. So the first one was sort of giving me more Western vibes almost, so we might use that in a themed area at some point. And I don't know what I was thinking with this one, but it doesn't really work. But I've got to put them in a different area of the park anyway, and there might be something that we use later on at some point. Changed up the sign for the guest services building as well there, because the one that we had before I didn't like, and I think this one looks much better. Just using one of the in-game signs. I think it's a mythology one perhaps, but it works well as a sort of classical generic architecture sign. And because I couldn't decide what to do with these other buildings, or what to do with this space, I thought we'll do a train station. It makes sense to have a train station near the front of the park, and we'll have a train running around the whole park. It's a little bit boxed into this area, so working out how the track layout's going to work is going to be a bit of a challenge later on in the build, but for now we're just building the station. So obviously I've just put the platform in there so that I know the size of it and everything like that. And again, just using reference images of actually for this one it was inspired by a building quite near to the entrance in Wales of Fun. I just got Google Maps Street View up and had a look around to see if there's anything I could find that would be suitable. I think it's Wales of Fun anyway. It might have been Kings Island, I can't remember, but yeah, this building's heavily inspired by that. And I think it looks pretty nice. I think it works out quite well, and it's really simple as well. It's just using some plain sort of stucco walls and using the generic pillar that we have to recolour all the parts on because it's meant to be a tropical one. And but that's fine, you know, it works fine. It's only a little bit of extra work to recolour a couple of bits on it. I am disappointed that the update hasn't really fixed the colour situation. You pick a new piece in the same set and it's still reverts back to its original colour. It doesn't remember the colour you're using for that set like you can do in Planet Coaster 1 and Planet Zoo. I don't understand why that wasn't fixed. We were told it would be fixed. You know, I don't like to whinge too much because I do enjoy the game, but that does annoy me a little bit, and it just takes a long time to pick colours for things and having to copy and paste the reference code and everything like that. But anyway, the building is now taking shape. We're putting in similar detail pieces to the guest services building, so using some of these brackets. I think they're brackets for holding up lamps, but they work absolutely fine for this as well. And then I was playing around a bit with the floor, just having to dig into the terrain a little bit to give this a floor, because the path runs perfectly to the ground. You can't sink a piece of flooring in underneath the path on a flat terrain if it's a flat path. And I wanted the path to still be visible because of the curbs on the side of the path. If we could disable them, it would make things a lot easier. Hopefully that is an update that we get at some point, so I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to implement. And then we've just got a very, very standard fence, which is a slightly more themed fence turned upside down, and using it twice with two different colours here to finish off the station platform. And then the rest of it is really just copying stuff over and filling in the back and sides of this building, which aren't going to be particularly visible. There's going to be a lot of foliage in front of it, so we don't really have to worry too much about how that all looks. But it actually comes together pretty easily, this one. I was quite pleased with the result. I've cut out some of the footage where I'm just copying stuff over to the backside of this building, because I thought, what's the point in showing that all again? And then just having these big sides, which I think are fine, keeping with the generic vibe. I didn't want to add any decals to this building, because I thought the buildings at the entrance area are going to be the more well kept and well looked after buildings, so I didn't feel it would be as realistic to have you know, bits of wall that are tearing away and things like that. So kept it straightforward, put a sign in, and then felt I needed just a little bit more, so I end up adding like a little star above the sign, and it kind of gives Western vibes a bit, but yeah, it's fine. I like how it looks. So yeah, we just go with Utopia Railroad for the name of this train, and yeah, that's fine by me. Doesn't have to be anything too crazy. Once I had this building in place, after doing a little bit of planting and foliage around the station, I wanted to work a little bit more on the central plaza. So firstly, I did some plants here, very, very straightforward. This plant actually that I'm putting in now, I think works really well in this area. Looks like something you definitely see in this sort of build. So yeah, that's all good. Struggling to think of how to talk about planting any more than what I'm saying there. So now I wanted a bit more of a rounded shape on the paths, which I find is never easy. And I added a third texture to the path because I thought that it was just a little bit too wide and open at the moment. And I kind of wanted a carousel in the middle, but it was way too big, so I put it over to the side, and I think the carousel ends up sitting in here really nicely, especially once we've recoloured it. And obviously I do a queue that goes all around the carousel, which is something you see quite a lot. For some reason that tore some of the path out, so I had to replace it. I don't know why. It's still quite finicky, the pathing system in the game. But I'm definitely getting a lot more used to it now, and I'm finding it a bit easier to work with, to be honest. And it's great that we can easily make these sort of wide open plazas. It's yeah, it is a good system. It could have been implemented better, but it's what we've got to work with now, so I'm happy to, continue persevering, especially now I'm getting a little bit more used to it. We've also got barriers now that actually prevent guests walking through stuff, so that's really cool. And I've used them to my advantage here, building this planter in the middle with a nice tree. I can't remember what sort of tree is that. Is that an oak tree or something like that? But it looks perfect for the centre of this plaza. Really happy with that tree and the plants around it. And then I fence off the carousel using the grand carousel here. I believe there's 2 carousels in the game. The other one's a bit smaller, but this is the one I wanted to use. I think this is the one from the actual launch DLC that we had to sort of buy, and I thought, yeah, no, I definitely want them rides, so I'll buy it. I still haven't bought the new DLC or the newest DLC because I just don't think I'll be using the rides anytime soon that are in that DLC, so there's no point in me really having it. Understand all the sort of aggravation with people not thinking that should be a paid DLC, but to be honest, over the next year I want more scenery pieces, so I kind of don't mind if there's more paid DLCs. Very controversial opinion probably, but as long as they're scenery packs, I don't care. I will chuck my money at them. Working with the benches now, I actually think the benches are so much better to work with in this game because you can just select them using the multi-select tool and move them using the the tool. I can't think what that tool's called now. I use it all the time, but it works a lot better to be able to do that and place them more specifically rather than just placing them freehand. So we're moving on to the final building for the area, and this is a gift shop or a souvenir shop. And this one actually came together really easily. I didn't struggle too much and have to build something and then delete it or anything like that. It all works out pretty good. Obviously having this circular entrance, so I don't have to really worry about having a door or anything, although I suppose this would need some sort of door so that it could be locked at night, so that might be something that I have to go back and think about at some point. I kind of overlooked that when I just wanted to get the building together and do the general shape of it and everything like that, but that shouldn't be too much trouble to make something. Using the circular walls actually to help me rotate stuff in a perfect sort of 180, that works pretty well. It's not perfectly clean, there are some jutty out bits, but it's fine, it's good enough and it works for what we want. And then I decided we'll just use the shop fronts, the shop front wall pieces for the windows, and then we can actually put a shop front in one of them, which isn't something I'd normally do. I'd normally just have the shop inside, but until we've done interiors and stuff, I thought it made sense to just have this in so that we've got somewhere that we can sell the souvenirs to the guests when they come in the park. Not that we worry too much about the guests in this game, although it's supposed to be a realistic build, we're not going into all the management side of things, because I just like to build in the game. I'm not really into the management side of things in this game. But having said that, it's still good to make sure that there's everything that the guests are going to need as we sort of go through and build the park. So doing some planters there, and now you can see I'm putting the actual shop in, which for some reason messed up the path, so I have to go back and sort that out again. And then it wasn't quite perfect for some reason. It had raised a bit of the path around it, which was rather weird, so I just ended up taking out a bit of path and placing the shop in. So yeah, it's perseverance. Then I wanted some trims for the windows, so I used some support pieces These are really good because they scale down really small, so I could do the ones in the middle perfectly. And yeah, these are pretty standard windows, really, nothing too special about these. I did actually have to go back in at one point to the guest services building, the first thing I built in this plaza, because I'd forgotten to put any glass in the windows, and it stayed like that for ages before I put the glass pieces in, so that's now done as well. And obviously we've got glass in these windows. And then it came to the task of doing the roof. Firstly, I just recoloured those pillars a bit, but then with the roof, I thought, oh, it's going to be tricky because we've got a rounded shape. But obviously, we've got rounded roofs that work perfectly for this. This whole building's on a grid, so it kind of makes things a bit easier. Firstly, it looks like I'm doing the path inside the shop as well, and that was pretty easy as well, again, because we're on a grid. There's a couple of bits that jut out a little bit, but we can hide that at some point. And then the back is just changed to sort of grey stone material or whatever, to imply that that'll be the backstage area. We will go back at some point and obviously make that proper backstage. I wanted more of a red roof colour here, but it didn't really work with everything around it, so we went for this dark blue, and I think that works out pretty well. And then finally I am putting a sign in. I was going to call it Memento Emporium, but that just didn't fit, so it ends up being called Emporium, and I use all different colours for each letter, which I think works out kind of well. It kind of, I don't know, like if you're in the UK you might remember a shop called Toys R Us. It kind of reminds me of that a bit, which wasn't the intention, but I think it works quite well maybe for attracting the kids' attention and, you know, dragging their parents in there to buy them a toy before they go home. I don't know, I think it's quite a fun idea, just using these pastel colours to create the sign. And then stick one more planter in, and it's just a little bit of polishing off everything in the area before we come towards the end of the build. And really have to start thinking now about what direction this park's going to go in, because I've got no idea whatsoever what I'm going to do next. I've not thought of any themed areas, not that we're going crazy on the theming, but I haven't really thought of anything yet. So I'm just going to see where my inspiration takes me really in the next build, I guess, and see what we can come up with. I do probably want to do a coaster next, so I can get a little bit more practice with the coaster builder in this game, because I haven't really used it that much yet. And but again, I've no idea what coaster we're going to go for, but maybe something kind of a bit more old school, like a Schwarzkopf or something like that would be cool in this park. There's probably going to be one or two coasters like that, as well as an area with a newer coaster, like maybe one of the new Gen Bacomas, or just like even an Intamin launch coaster or something like that. I don't know yet, but these are just some thoughts that I've had anyway. Last thing I am doing here is putting in some barriers to prevent guests walking through things, and they do seem to work pretty well. I'm glad that we've got that feature back, because it makes working path and stuff a lot easier. You don't have to delete bits of path and everything like that. I wanted a tree in here, but it didn't want to be too big because I didn't want to hide the carousel behind it. So I just went for one of those sort of palm tree type things, and doing some fencing there, and then getting rid of this area pathing, and then that's pretty much it. So yeah, we will be back for another build at some point, and thank you for watching this one, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.